Behind prison walls, in the shadows of California's deadliest cells, a brotherhood was born, not of blood, not of family, but of power. They called it La Eme, the M, the Mexican Mafia, a name that would come to control entire neighborhoods, dictate life and death, and rewrite the rules of organized crime in America. What began with a handful of young men inside one prison cell grew into one of the most violent and powerful criminal organizations in American history. This is the untold story of the Mexican Mafia, how it began, how it rose, and how it still casts its shadow over the streets of California. This is Gangster Chronicles. We uncover the truths behind America's most feared gangsters. Subscribe now for more stories because the past isn't finished with us yet. Chapter 1, Birth of La Eme, 1950s. To understand the Mexican Mafia, we must go back to the late 1950s, a time of booming cities and marginalized youth. Many young Mexican Americans lived in poverty and faced systemic discrimination. In East LA, gangs like White Fence and Hoyo Maravilla patrolled the streets. When Chicano youths landed behind bars, they arrived fragmented. Different barrios, different street gangs, little unity. In prison, the divisions made them vulnerable. Prisons were racially segregated. Mexican-American inmates had no cohesive voice. In 1957, inside Deuel Vocational Institution in Tracy, California, a small coalition of 13 young men came together. Among them was Luis Huero Buff Flores, often regarded as the founding figure of La Eme. Flores, a product of East LA, combined street toughness with ambition. They chose M, the 13th letter, and named themselves La Eme, the M. It was more than a name, it was an identity. These men vowed to transform themselves from isolated prisoners into a force that demanded respect. From the beginning, blood was their proof. Initiation required violence, stabbings, beatings, or worse. Once sworn in, one became a carnal, brother. There was no safe exit. Loyalty was eternal, and defiance fatal. Thus, out of cold prison yards and constant threat, the Mexican Mafia was born. 13 men determined to coalesce power in a system built on division. Chapter 2, Blood Oaths and Brotherhood. La Eme's unity depended on an unbreakable code. Watching, testing, waiting, no one was accepted lightly. Prospective recruits proved themselves through violence or unwavering obedience. When admitted, they became carnals. This was not a casual brotherhood. It was a bond sealed by blood. To betray a carnal was to risk your life, your family, and your legacy. Symbols mattered. The black hand tattoo, the number 13, the 3 dots signifying Mi Vida Loca. These were not mere marks, they were declarations. A carnal's gaze, a nod, a hand gesture, all could carry orders. Rules were absolute. No betrayal, no disrespect. Obey orders. La Eme comes first, always. Those who broke the code didn't live long. Snyder in the yard, strangled in solitary, stabbed in the chow hall. Mutilated warnings for all to see. La Eme was no ragtag gang. It was a structure of discipline, fear, and authority. Chapter 3, Prison Domination and the Seeds of War, 1960s, 1970s. By the 1960s, La Eme had outgrown Tracy and Deuel. Founders and early members were transferred to California's major prisons, San Quentin, Folsom, Soledad. These fortresses became their territory. From the moment they arrived in new yards, things changed. Gambling, contraband, protection rackets, everything became taxed under La Eme's thumb. Those who refused risked death. Gunshot echoes weren't needed. Razor-sharp shanks sufficed. But there was opposition. Among Northern California inmates, resentment brewed. They felt dismissed, mocked by the urban cholos of Los Angeles. In Soledad, a new gang took shape, Nuestra Familia, to defend Northerners from La Eme's dominance. The tensions exploded in 1971 during what became known as the Shoe War, a brawl in Soledad's SHU, the Shoe, triggered by a stolen pair of shoes. Steel flashed, bodies crumpled, and the feud was irreversibly born. From that point, the prison system was divided. La Eme loyalists, aligned Southern faction, the Sureños, versus the Norteños under Nuestra Familia. Every yard, every transfer, every shared meal became potential battlegrounds. Chapter 4, The War with Nuestra Familia. Nuestra Familia didn't emerge as allies. They rose in opposition. Comprised largely of inmates from rural Northern California, they rejected the idea that Los Angeles cholos should dominate all others. A seemingly trivial theft, a pair of shoes, ignited the war. La Eme struck back. Blood was spilled. Inmates from both sides died. The shoe war was a bloody declaration. A new order would be enforced. From that moment on, the divide was permanent. Southern versus Northern, Eme versus NF. Behind prison walls, the conflict led to daily carnage, stabbings, ambushes, coded orders across cell blocks. Outside on the streets, the conflict filtered down. Gangs in the barrios aligned with either Sureños or Norteños. Colors, territories, rivalries grew. La Eme, once a prison-born protection network, had become a ruthless empire. The war with Nuestra Familia would define its legacy, a battle of blood, territory, and identity. Chapter 5. The Rise of Legends. Great empires are shaped by their architects, men who command not just fear, but reverence. For La Eme, three names stand above all: Luis Huero Buff, Flores, Joe Pegleg Morgan, and Rodolfo Cheyenne Cadena. Huero Buff may have lit the spark, but his vision would be expanded by others. Rodolfo Cheyenne Cadena, born in 1943, became a charismatic, ambitious leader. He sought not just prison dominance, but to extend La Eme's influence into the streets. In prison, Cadena struck alliances with other groups and attempted peace talks even with rivals. But the man who truly transformed La Eme into a ruthless, business-minded empire was Joe Pegleg Morgan. Morgan, of Slavic descent, became the first non-Mexican to rise high in the Mexican Mafia. Morgan was cunning. He forged alliances, brokered deals, built networks of influence. He understood that La Eme's strength lay beyond prison walls. His reach expanded into the streets, into narcotics, into extortion and control. Cadena's fate, however, was sealed. In December 1972, he was ambushed and stabbed to death by rival inmates, allegedly at the orders of Nuestra Familia. His death deepened the war. Under Morgan's shadow, La Eme consolidated power, turning from prison gang to criminal syndicate, demanding loyalty from legions of street soldiers called Sureños, enforcing tribute in barrios from San Diego to East LA. These men reshaped the meaning of La Eme. Their names, Huero Buff, Cheyenne, Pegleg, became legends whispered in cell blocks and graffiti across the city. Chapter 6, The Code and Empire, 1980s-1990s. With its leadership in place, La Eme established a code as ironclad as prison bars. Membership was for life. Betrayal, disloyalty, disrespect, each was punishable by death. They enforced a system of taxation. Street gangs, Sureños, had to pay tribute for protection, rights to sell, or operate in territories. La Eme became the silent governor of Hispanic criminal enterprises in Southern California. Prison communication was never silenced. Kites, hidden notes, coded messages via lawyers or visits, even cryptic nods across cells conveyed orders. The hierarchy extended beyond concrete walls. But with wealth and influence came scrutiny. In the 1990s, federal law enforcement turned attention to La Eme under the racketeering and organized crime statutes, e.g. RICO. Leaders were indicted, trials loomed, yet La Eme survived. Its structure adapted. It went deeper underground. The code held. Its operatives spread, inside and out, shadows covering streets and cells alike. Chapter 7, Crackdown and Reinvention, 1990s-2000s. In the 1990s and early 2000s, La Eme faced its greatest challenge, the full weight of federal law enforcement. Massive operations, undercover informants, wiretaps, the state struck deep. High-ranking members were arrested, imprisoned, sometimes cooperating witnesses emerged, rare but shattering. Yet even locked in high security or solitary confinement, the Mexican Mafia continued issuing orders. Prison walls weren't enough to break them. New generations of carnals rose, filling gaps. Scattered leadership meant decentralization, and also vulnerability. But the core remained: the code, the loyalty, the network. La Eme didn't vanish. It evolved. It adapted to pressure. It telescoped into layers so covert that few knew who truly ruled. The Black Hand remained alive, its whisper carried encoded signals across yards and city blocks. Chapter 8. La Eme Today, 2000s present. Today, La Eme is no relic. It is a shadow empire. It remains among the most powerful prison gangs in the U.S. It wields influence over thousands of foot soldiers and local gangs, Sureños, that pledge loyalty in exchange for protection or access. Its reach crosses state lines, touching Arizona, Nevada, federal prisons, and beyond. But its authority is less centralized now. Leadership is fractured. Internal disputes and law enforcement pressure have weakened the overt command structure. Still, the old code, no betrayal, no disrespect, pay your dues, continues to haunt lives behind bars and in the streets. The war with Nuestra Familia persists in many prisons. Norteños and Sureños still clash in yards, still stake claims in communities. The blood feud cycles onward. La M's empire is now partly myth, partly terror, partly organized crime. It operates in silence, extortion, drug trafficking, contract violence. Its signals are subtle, its threats implied. For a new generation of young Chicanos, the name still carries weight. For law enforcement, the name still inspires fear. The Mexican Mafia endures, not as a gang, but as a legacy etched in prison walls and street codes. And so the story continues. The Black Hand still moves in the darkness. What began as a pact of survival in a violent prison yard now looms over city blocks, cell blocks, and generations bound by fear and betrayal. The Mexican Mafia began as a handful of young men looking for unity. What they created instead was a shadow empire of violence and fear, an empire that continues to shape California's streets and prisons, and their story is far from over. Because in the world of La Eme, betrayal is inevitable, loyalty is tested in blood, and every carnal knows one truth. Once you join the Mafia, the only way out is death. Stay tuned, subscribe to Gangster Chronicles, because in our next episode we'll uncover the bloody war between La Eme and Nuestra Familia, a conflict that turned California into a battlefield.